Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. In what some are calling the most serious incident since the 2001 collision of a Chinese jet fighter and a U.S. surveillance aircraft, China last week captured an underwater U.S. Navy drone in the South China Sea. America called the action a violation of international law, while China agreed to return the drone, but accused the United States of overhyping the incident. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump issued an angry tweet to discuss the motivations behind each side's actions, the ongoing disagreements over the South China Sea, and the emerging picture of shifting international perspectives on the power. I'm happy to be joined in the studio by visiting scholar from Tsinghua University, Rick Dunham, Senior Fellow of China Institute of International Studies, Yang Xiyu. But before we begin our discussion here, let's take a look at this.
Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Yang Yujun said late Saturday that China had decided to hand over the U.S. underwater drone it captured to the United States in an appropriate manner. According to the authorities, on the afternoon of December 15th, a Chinese naval lifeboat located an unidentified device in the waters of the South China Sea. In order to prevent the device from causing harm to the safety of navigation and personnel of passing vessels, the lifeboat crew verified and examined the device in a professional and responsible manner. The device was identified as an underwater drone of the United States. The U.S. military has for a long time dispatched vessels and aircraft to carry out close-in reconnaissance and military surveys within Chinese waters. However, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump blasted away at China on Twitter, saying, "We should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back. Let them keep it." Beijing has said U.S. attempts to over-dramatize the issue were inappropriate and not conducive to its settlement.
Gentlemen, how do you read into the moves by the Chinese government? I mean, the seizure and the return of the drone to the United States Navy?
Well, I would say there are two possibilities. One, it was sort of an accident. It wasn't something that was planned, and the Chinese government seized it and returned it. The other was that tensions have been increasing, and the Chinese government wanted, during this period of uncertainty between U.S. presidents, to act strong, and then turned it back over because the purpose had been served.
Do you think this incident is that dramatic on the Chinese side to issue a trial balloon in an attempt to sound out the reactions from President-elect Donald Trump or the outgoing president of President Obama? I mean, what are your interpretations about the dramatic development of this incident, the worst case scenario since what was the year?
Yeah,
2001.
By the coalition. To the contrary to what you mentioned, the Chinese authority, PLA, really wanted to calm down this incident, no matter what is the real or true intention behind the scene. Return them to the United States in normal way, in professional way. That means no matter what incidents means, this thing should be calmed down. That is the true intention now for the Chinese government. Actually, during the past few years, there have been quite many incidents or accidents between the two sides, but every time China wants to calm down every incident or accident simply because China doesn't want to let the tail swag the dog. We want the dog swag the tail. So that is the always constant position by Chinese authorities.
What do you think of a development of sense about professionalism for the militaries? Because it's an open secret that we're going to have more maritime disputes or close encounter airborne between the air forces of either Japan or China. Now, what do you think of the establishment of a hotline mechanism between the two militaries, the United States and China, so that things will not spin out of control?
I think this is very important. I think from the evidence we've seen over the last few years, the American and the Chinese militaries want better communication. They do not want something accidental to turn into an international incident. And I think in this case, if it hadn't been for Donald Trump with his trigger finger on the tweet button, it probably would have gone away pretty quickly. But then he escalated it, even though he's not even president yet.
What do you think of the differences, if any, between this drone release, capture and release, as well as the EP-3 surveillance plane that we had in the year 2001 in Lingshui, Hainan province?
Well, big difference. The earlier, the incident in 2001 was really aggressive. American complained the Chinese pilot was too close to the EP-3. But the key question is, who close to whom? It is the EP-3 who is too close to Chinese island, Hainan Island. When I told the story to an American friend of mine, he asked me, how many miles from the Hainan Island? I said, just several tens of miles. Oh, he said, wow, it was too close. So when U.S. complained Wang Hai, the dead pilot,
the hero.
Hero of China. He complained that the hero of China, Wang Hai, was too close to EP-3, but the key facts is the EP-3 had been too close to Chinese, very key area of the defense. So that's the serious matter and the nature of that incident. But for this incident, quite different. The bigger background is, during the past few months, even more than 1 year, the U.S. has conducted so many very close, too close surveillance along China's sensitive areas. That's the background. And for this incident, China finding that and put it and then return. That's.
Excuse me, give me a break. Did it occur in international waters? Because that's of critical importance for audiences on both sides to have a quick understanding about what was really going on. If China was accused of violating international law, it means the incident may have occurred in what is called the international waters. What was the truth?
Well, whenever we talk about the international law, international law is quite too big to be clear. For example, frequent, very close surveillance close to a sovereign country's areas is an international law. China can do that close to Japan, close to South Korea. So the so-called international law need to be practiced in the equal footing. So that's my view regarding to this incident. The key for this institute is China put it, and how to deal with this issue. That is the key. And China returned it according to the international law. So that's.
So Rick, what do you think of the low-profile response from the Chinese government? I mean, the general question broadly would be why the Chinese authorities responded in a low profile from the telephone gate between Tsai Ing-wen and Donald Trump and the return of drone to the US Navy. In both cases, the Chinese authorities kept a low profile and didn't fuel the tensions that may be very dangerous for
I think
bilateral relationship.
both governments at this point do not want to do anything to inflame tensions.
But Donald Trump doesn't represent the U.S. government.
That's correct. But the Obama administration at this point, I think, is not going to push anything that could become a diplomatic incident. They know there's enough tension ahead. And I think the Chinese government doesn't.
A follow-up question, Rick, would be, should we take Donald Trump very seriously? During the transition period, he used tweets so often to impress his audience and to impress his competitors that he's here, he should not be ignored, and he's the formidable force to reckon with. I mean, which side should be taken more seriously? The Obama administration, which is leaving in a few weeks, or this Donald Trump, which has a big mouth?
I think you have to take Donald Trump seriously.
Well,
to quote him, his own word, his actions, tweeting the way he is, like he is president of the United States, are unprecedented. There's never been a president-elect who acts as if he's president, and so he will have his finger on the nuclear buttons soon, and so you have to take what he is doing seriously, not necessarily, but as an indication of what kind of person he is.
Xi Yu, yes, of course, we have every reason to respect this president-elect, but do you think we take him seriously on condition that he takes his upcoming presidency seriously? If he fails to take the presidency seriously, What are the points for China to respect him seriously?
Well, I think there's a turning point, say January 20th, when he takes into the office. Before that, we should continue our focus on Obama administration. So, comparatively, returning to your question, we don't take a too serious attitude to what Donald Trump said, because legally speaking, now he's not the president. He's the president-elect. He's going to be the president. So we should take more attention, take more seriousness to the positioned President Obama. So now, yesterday, today, tomorrow, till January 20th, we shouldn't take him too seriously. However, after he takes into the office, we need to take every word of his on seriousness. And if he take a positive, kind attitudes, words towards China-U.S. relation, China of course, China should do the corresponding attitude, and vice versa.
The next question, Rick, is very much about why he's been antagonistic to one party, China, and pretty friendly, if not quiet, to the other, Russia.
Right.
While the Obama administration and even some of the big shots in the Republicans agreed to establish an independent committee to investigate into the alleged interference by Russia with the presidential campaign. Do you think President-elect Donald Trump used the dramatic incident like the drone, like a telephone with Tsai Ing-wen, to divert public attention from the ongoing investigation into his, alleged close relationship, if not warm chemistry with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Donald Putin.
Donald Putin.
Well, during the campaign, he did use the tweets to change the debate. But in this case, I think he just woke up in the morning and was angry and tweeted. I wouldn't put it past him in the future to do that. I think it's been very difficult for me to understand the interrelationships with Donald Trump and world leaders, because as you say, he's antagonistic to China, but he's been friendly to Japan in this period. At the same time, he criticized them in the campaign. He's been very friendly toward the president of the Philippines, who has pivoted away from the United States and toward China. To me, it's illogical, and it seems to be built on personal relationships. And Putin and President-elect Trump seem to have a good personal relationship, something he doesn't have with Western European leaders, something he doesn't have with Xi Jinping. It's not that he has a negative relationship, they just don't have any relationship.
So do you think the use of tweets and a telephone call with Tsai Ing-wen were all used for domestic politics, to divert public attention from the current investigation into the Russian interference, quote unquote, with the presidential campaign?
Well, I'm afraid he did that not because he wants to make use of as a domestic politics, as you mentioned, because for the majority of American grassroots, they don't care about the Taiwan's sensitivity and importance. However, in foreign policy, it is matter. It is matter, and it is very substantive. So I think I really doubt, unlike many of my Chinese friends, I really doubt Donald Trump wanted to make use of both of them, tweets and phone call, to send a signal. He wanted to make some changes by doing deals, just like he claimed.
Okay, we sort of agree with you, your reckoning and line of logic. Look at this game. He vowed over and over on the campaign trail that he would put America first, which means automatically that he would align Russia, the Philippines, behind, these are two crucial players in the broad game in the Asia-Pacific region. President-elect Trump wants to align the United States with Russia and the Philippines over one mission. antagonizing the PRC, which is viewed widely in the United States by policymakers as the most formidable potential competitor, geopolitically and business-like. So what do you think of his calculations, if that should be the
Well,
case?
if the calculation is to antagonize the People's Republic of China, I think it threatens the American economy and the global economy, as well as China's economic growth. To me, it doesn't make sense that he would align with Russia against China. Russia's economy is terrible. Russia's economy is either continuing to fall or is at the bottom level. China's economy continues to grow, even though the growth rate has slowed. It's so important to American consumers to have manufactured goods from China that are relatively low in cost to keep inflation low. I don't understand it. I mean, maybe there is method to his madness, or maybe it is just 21st century madness.
Maybe instead of antagonizing China, President-elect Trump should consider carefully the hike in interest rate by the Federal Reserve on a front that he's so familiar with. But you are watching Dialogue with Rick Dunham and Yang Xiyu. We're discussing impact of the latest incident between the two navies in the South China Sea, the seizure and the return of a drone of the United States. So we'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Let's look at the strong factor of uncertainty in the South China Sea. In fact, it's pretty clear that President Duterte, the newly elected president of the Philippines, has stepped aside and said the Philippines would now set aside the Hague's Spratly Islands ruling and concentrate on developing its bilateral relations with China. Additionally, although the drone seizure took place in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, their defense minister said that this is the issue between the United States and China. Don't forget, there is the existing 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty between Manila and Washington, and yet your ally, President Duterte, has chosen to stay away from the hot potato of the drone. Now, what do you think of this policy implication for Washington, which may have been left pretty embarrassed, if not disoriented, in this critical area?
I think there's significant policy implications. Number one, I think it's significant that President Obama has basically tried to ignore President Duterte, not make things worse in his final month in office. And he will leave it to President Trump to decide how to rebalance the relationship. But it's very significant if the Philippines is not pursuing territorial claims in the South China Sea, because that eliminates about half of the reason that the United States was stepping up its military action in the South China Seas, along with the Vietnamese claims. They were the primary claimants in the disputes in the South China Sea. And it would be very difficult for the United States to justify ever increasing military presence if it is just to protect Vietnam. So I do think it's significant, but I think the relationship as it emerges between President Trump, President Duterte is going to be another turning point in this discussion.
Well, I mean, broadly, we have yet another question, Xiyu, about what does it take to assume a global leadership for a country like the United States in the post-Cold War era. On the one hand, the US government has been so concerned about the human rights record, both of the old and former president of Egypt, what's his name? Mubarak, Hosni Mubarak.
Yeah.
He was accused of being a strong man, was not cooperative with the Arab Revolution. And in the case of the Philippines, the United States was angry, accusing Manila of violating procedures of justice, not following the law, rule of law, allowing rampant shooting in the street, killing suspects of drugs or whatever. So, on the other hand, there is the strong geopolitical concern. Is it easy job or the other way around for the president of the United States to maintain a balance between geopolitical concerns and their concerns about human rights?
Well, actually, you are touching on the long time, century-long of Americans' contradictions in their foreign policy. Basically, U.S. foreign policy is always driven by two factors. One is the national interest. The other is the American value.
Right.
And the human rights value and allied interests, national interests. when the two things fall in the contradictions, for example, the Filipinos, they do something different from American value. But in the security area, U.S. really need to keep the stable relationship. They are following the contradictions. Now the U.S. policy have some split parts. On one hand, they really want to maintain the stability of the Filipino-American friendship and alliances. But on the other hand, they stress too much on the value issue, then make a fair back to their national interests.
Look at what happened in the mid-1990s during the Clinton administration. He was able to separate human rights from MFN, the most favored trading nation status that was granted eventually by the U.S. Congress, and that paved the way for a rise in the bilateral trade. That had somehow showcased the flexibility of the U.S. administration. Do you think for a shrewd business guy like Donald Trump, he's going to return to some degree of flexibility on the structural contradiction between American values and geopolitical concerns in the case of the Philippines or in the case of the PRC?
Well, I would hope we would see a shrewd businessman. I still remain to be convinced that he is a shrewd businessman, but let's hope for the sake of the United States and the world. But in terms of his philosophy during the campaign, it is America first, which is America should be less interested in imposing its will on others. The contradiction will be if he decides he wants to use the U.S. military in other places. But I would think he will be less interested in those types of human rights issues in other countries.
Politicians could be the hostage of one thing or the other. In the case of Donald Trump, he himself has practically zero experience with foreign policy or any political experiences in the D.C. With this blank sheet, he might be more likely to be held hostage by senior advisors on his team. Let's look at them one by one. John Bolton, James Mattis, nicknamed the Mad Dog, and Michael Pence, who said something very nasty in his interview with Meet the Press about the telephone gate with Tsai Ing-wen. John Bolton is well known for being hawkish. I mean, if he is surrounded by these hawkish guys, would he automatically fall victim to ideology and the geopolitical rivalry that those guys hold so dear deep in their minds? I mean, this business executive, the business tycoon, Donald Trump, he doesn't care about politics, but he might fall victim to the zealotry of ideology of those guys. I mean, those guys are perhaps the fans of a neocon.
It always matters who has the president's ear. You look at George W. Bush, and the neocons and Dick Cheney had his ear over the State Department, over Colin Powell, and even Condoleezza Rice, who was his national security advisor. If you look with Ronald Reagan, Caspar Weinberger, who was a very hawkish anti-Soviet defense secretary, was much more influential than Alexander Haig and George Shultz, the secretaries of state. So I think if the people you mentioned have his ear, yes, he will be very hawkish. We just don't know his Secretary of State, the Exxon chief executive, Rex Tillerson. He's very pro-Russian. We don't know what he thinks about China. We don't know what he thinks about the overall Middle East situation. So I think what's very important is whether the John Bolton-led hawks, the neocons part 2, are powerful, or if Rex Tillerson, with a different kind of geopolitical view, ends up being important.
You know, guys, we are not pretty sure who is the boss in shaping American foreign policy. The Capitol Hill or Washington, or the White House or the Pentagon. Richard Nixon came to China in 1972 because of Henry Kissinger, right? Similarly, we could raise a number of other examples to illustrate the importance of National Security Advisor Condi in the case of Bush Jr. But what will happen to Donald Trump if he were to choose Rex Tillerson, a pro-Russian guy?
Well, I think choose Tillerson as Secretary of State may send, including a signal that Donald Trump really want to improve relations with Russia. However, you mentioned surrounding him, there have been quite varied assistances with quite varied ideologies. So I think that will be first troubles for White House team rather than the target of the foreign policy. It's not the Russians' problem, it's a White House problem. Different idea, different people have different ideas within the leading team. That will be I'm afraid that will be a bumpy period for the formation of leadership. Just like Reagan, the first year of Reagan administration was quite a bumpy road for the
bumpy road
for the team building. I'm afraid the first year of Trump administration may repeat.
Right, the Reagan administration turned out to be the best years between Washington and Beijing at the height of the Cold War. But what's the chance for Rex Tillerson to be approved by the Congress in the hearing?
I think it's highly likely. The only way he would be stopped is if all of the Democrats went against him and then several of the hawkish anti-Russian Republicans. I've seen him as a chief executive, and even though there is some resistance to him because of his ties to Russia, he's a very accomplished executive. He responds well, he's knowledgeable, and he responds well to inquiries. So he's the kind of person who should have a successful confirmation hearing. But you never know what's going to happen in Washington. Democrats are going to try to pick several people and make examples of them. It's just, I wouldn't choose him because it could get worse. Trump could send someone who would be worse for the Democrats.
Just a real quick reply from both of you. Now, the last question is, who will deliver the most decisive and influential voice in whatever congressional hearing about China? Secretary of Defense, Admiral of the Pacific Fleet, Harry Harris, or Secretary of State in the Congress? I mean, who will command most of the attention from lawmakers in the case of China? Your hunch, please, Xi Yu.
I cannot see anyone who have a strong influences about China to President Donald Trump, simply because none of the surrounding people have a in-depth knowledge about China. Unlike Dr. Kissinger suggested, you should choose some people who knowledge.
Rick, what's your take?
I think Mr. Mad Dog, the Secretary of Defense, Mad Dog Mattis, would be the most influential.
Well, that would drive China mad.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.